15-year-old sledgehammer killer who went on Dr. Phil.
Did you kill your mother?
Yeah.
She make a noise?
I could just hear the hammer hitting her head.
And what did it sound like?
It was this wide thumping sound.
And then you hit her again. And again.
Yeah.
Very quick reminder that this is the last day to enter my giveaway. If you don't know what I'm talking about, watch the pinned video on my profile. By 2012, Zachary Davis was 15. He lived at home with his mother Melanie and his older brother, 16-year-old Josh. From a very young age, Zachary Davis was showing signs of mental illness. I'm talking like 9 years old. And everything got even worse after his dad passed away. He started therapy at like 10 or 11 years old. He was diagnosed with schizophrenia and depression. He said he was constantly hearing voices that weren't there, particularly the voice of his dead father. For whatever reason, Zachary's mother Melanie pulled him out of therapy after only 4 sessions. And Zachary's mental health would progressively get worse and worse. As a preteen and an early teenager, he was an outcast. He had no friends. He was just the weird guy. He didn't shower. He wore the same hoodie to school every single day. He had an interest in true crime, but like in the way where he idolized serial killers and had zero empathy for victims. He had these journals that he would write in constantly, and he would write some like really weird things in them. Like he wrote, "You can't spell slaughter without laughter." Despite all those red flags, 15-year-old Zachary Davis showed no signs of violence until August 10th, 2012. That evening, 15-year-old Zachary went to the movies with his mom, Melanie, and his older brother, 16-year-old Josh, and it seemed like a normal, fun evening. After the movies, the family came home and they all seemingly went to their rooms to go to bed, but Zach did not. After the movies, Zach went in his room and he started packing a bag. He packed clothes, his journals, his toothbrush, like he was planning on running away. But first, he had something much more sinister in mind. He went into his family's garage and he went and got this big, huge sledgehammer. At 11 p.m., while Zach's mom, Melanie, slept, her youngest son, Zachary, snuck into her room and brutally attacked her with this huge sledgehammer. He hit his mom with it over like 20 times, and the entire time, Zachary was hysterically laughing. This is just a few hours after he had this nice evening going to the movies with his mom and his brother Josh. Right after killing his mom, 15-year-old Zachary went, while still covered in his mother's blood. He started pouring gasoline and alcohol throughout the entire house. Then he set his house on fire and then fled. His plan was to burn his 16-year-old brother alive in the house. Zach's brother Josh did survive though. He actually woke up in time because he heard the fire alarms. Before he escaped the burning house, he went to go wake up his mom and help her get to safety. But when he goes into his mom's room, he just sees her lying dead in her bed in a pool of her own blood. Like, can you even imagine that? Waking up to your house on fire and then finding your mom like that. He had to must have thought that he was in like this bad, terrible nightmare. Zachary was found and arrested early the next morning. He was just walking around like 10 miles from his house, still wearing his blood-soaked clothing. Zachary ended up making a full confession where he showed no remorse. He didn't show any remorse then. He didn't show any remorse during the trial. To this day, he has never once showed any remorse. He said that his deceased father's voice that he had been hearing for a really long time was telling him these like really violent, awful things about his mom, and that he killed his mom because she was a bad mom. And he wanted to kill his brother Josh by setting the house on fire. He wanted to kill his brother in a really slow and painful way because Zach alleges that his brother Josh actually brutally SA'd him. Zach's brother Josh has always firmly denied that he SA'd his brother. He's denied it over and over and over again. And there is no evidence that this ever happened except for Zach's journals, where he wrote in detail about it multiple times. This case went to trial as usual, which was pretty controversial because a lot of people think that Zach was mentally unwell. I mean, clearly I think he was, but he was found fit to stand trial. Also, despite being 15 years old when he committed this awful murder and attempted murder, he was tried as an adult. He was found guilty and he was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of a release after 70 years, 70. So that means he's never getting out. And if he did, he would be like in his mid to late 80s. This case is most well known and went like really viral because he did a really creepy interview with Dr. Phil. Like I said, to this day, Zachary Davis has never shown any remorse. He actually says the only thing he regrets is not killing his brother Josh with a sledgehammer too. If you watched the end of this video, thank you so much. Don't forget to enter my giveaway if you haven't yet. It ends today. Everything you need to know is in the pinned video on my profile. Let me know all your thoughts on this case in the comments. Have you ever seen those viral Dr. Phil clips? And would you ever want me to cover another case that was on Dr. Phil? The killer that inspired hundreds of horror movies. Buffalo Bill from Silence of the Lambs, Norman Bates from Psycho, Leatherface from Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and many more were all inspired by this freak Ed Gein. Disclaimer, this is not the video that you're gonna wanna be eating while watching. Ed Gein was from the tiny town of Plainsfield, Wisconsin. His father, George, was an abusive alcoholic, and his mother, Augusta, hated her husband. Well, actually, she kind of hated everybody. She was a very religious woman with a strict moral code. She thought the entire world was evil and sinful, but especially women. She believed that all women were promiscuous S-workers who were instruments of the devil, except herself, of course. She thought that she was the only pure woman in the entire world. And she instilled all of these beliefs on her two sons, Henry and Ed. Augusta was like the blueprint for toxic boy moms. She wanted her sons to stay with her forever, be her little mama's boys, have no friends, and definitely no girlfriends. And it worked because Ed was obsessed with his mother, even calling her the one true love of his life. And when his father passed away in 1940, him and his mom got even closer. But Ed's brother, Henry, did not feel the same way about his mother that his younger brother did. He wanted to grow up, move out, have friends, have a wife. And he began to actually talk badly about their mother to Ed, which Ed did not like at all. And very soon after this, Ed's brother mysteriously passed away in a suspicious fire. There was a lot of shady details, and Ed was the last person to be seen with his brother. It was not ruled foul play in 1944, and to this day, it's still speculated if he killed his brother, if he did not kill his brother. I definitely think he did. I think that his brother was his first victim. And only a year later, Ed's mother also passed away, and then everything changed. This was absolutely devastated for the now 39-year-old Ed. He kept his mother's bedroom in his house in pristine condition while allowing the rest of the house to get filthy and disgusting. Ed lived in this very small town where everyone knew each other and everyone thought that Ed was kind of a weirdo. He definitely gave people, especially women, the creeps, but he especially creeped out the local tavern owner, a woman named Mary Hogan. Allegedly, this lady, Mary, was similar to Ed's mother in both attitude and physical appearance. Ed would go to her tavern almost every single day to just sit there and stare at her until she went missing. Mary was actually one of 5 people to disappear in a handful of years from this very small town. Considering that the population of the town was less than 700 people, it's kind of weird. That's a lot of people to be disappearing. And in November of 1957, a 6th person would disappear. She was the owner of the local hardware store, this woman named Bernice Warden. Luckily, they were actually able to determine who her last customer was at the hardware store before she disappeared, and you guessed it, it was Ed. So officers want to question Ed, see if he saw anything, see if he knows anything. So they go to his property, which is now referred to as Ed Gein's House of Horrors. Officers are walking through Ed's property trying to find him. He might not be there, but they're walking through, and then one of the officers feels something hit his shoulder. So he looks up, and there, hanging from the ceiling, upside down by her feet, was Bernice. And this was a gruesome sight. She was missing her head and also all of her insides. Immediately, all of the officers went outside to throw up and call backup. Also inside of Ed's house was a lot of stuff that he had made out of skin and not from an animal. He made furniture like chairs and lampshades. He made clothing like shirts, leggings, corsets, gloves, all made from human skin. There was also a mask made out of a face, and there was also a belt completely made out of a specific female body part. Also, an entire wall in his house that he had lined with 9 female faces that he put up as decoration. They also found the face of the missing tavern owner, Mary, inside of a plastic bag. And you can find photos of all of the things and more that I just told you about online. I'm not your mom. I'm not going to tell you what to do, what not to look up. I'm just going to tell you, remember that you can never unsee something. So you're probably thinking that this man is obviously a serial killer and one of the most disturbing, terrifying of them all. Technically, he's not. Ed only ever confessed to unaliving Mary and Bernice, and all of the other bodies in his house he got from robbing graves. He claims in the 12 years since his mother had passed away, he could not believe that she was gone. He thought that she was still alive, so he began finding graves of women that were around the same age or kind of looked like his mom that had recently passed away, so he could use their bodies to make a full skin suit out of them. And apparently he would even go out at night in this suit so he could feel like his mom walking around in the moonlight. And then he would dance in this skin suit. Could you imagine like going out to walk your dog and seeing that? It's nightmare fuel. He claims that he only began to unalive people so that he could get the freshest material for the things that he was making. It's so gross, I'm going to be sick. Ed Gein spent the rest of his life in a psychiatric hospital before passing away in 1984. Ed went on to inspire like a majority of like the classic horror movies, and then those movies inspired the next generation of horror movies and so on and so forth. So if you're a fan of horror movies and like the horror movie genre, chances are that your favorite movies only exists because of this guy, Ed Gein. If you watched to the end of this video, thank you so much, because I know this was a rough one to get through. I'm right there with you. Recently, I asked you guys, because you guys are always asking me to cover some of the more like notorious, well-known killers throughout history, because I tend to try and like cover a lot of cases that people don't really know. So that's how I ended up covering this case today. If there's a case that you want to see me cover, let me know in the comments. I will see you guys tomorrow. I love you guys so, so much. Today, we're going to be going over the well-known case of 6-year-old Adam Walsh. Although technically solved, many people that know the case and know the case well are very skeptical. Is this case really solved? So we're going to be going over the case, and then I'm going to tell you a little bit about 3 suspects that I believe are most likely to be responsible, including that of notorious serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer. It was around noon on July 27th, 1981. Adam and his mother visited the mall in Hollywood, Florida, so his mom could purchase a lamp that she had been eyeing up for months. The mall was really busy that day. Adam's mom actually had trouble even finding a parking spot. The mother and son entered the mall through the Sears entrance, and as soon as they entered the store, 6-year-old Adam's eyes locked on the toy section. There was a video game display and a bunch of older boys playing an Atari, which for my younger audience is like the PlayStation Xbox of that time. Adam's mom allowed her son to play the video game with the older boys, and she was only gone for about 10 minutes before returning to the toy section to not only find her son Adam missing, but every boy that was just there minutes earlier playing video games were all gone. You know, I have a lot of parents that follow me, and you know that feeling when you don't see your kid even just for a second. Adam's mom is looking through every single aisle in Sears. She's checking every inch of the busy mall. She has a Sears employee call over the intercom for Adam not once but twice. But there was no sign of her son. Adam had vanished from a busy mall in broad daylight, so 6-year-old Adam was reported missing. Turns out, just moments after Adam's mom left her son to play video games with these older boys, the older boys broke out in a fight about whose turn it was to play next. So a Sears employee saw that they're causing this disturbance and kind of kicked all the boys out of the mall. So the employee led all of the boys, including Adam, out of the mall, out of an entrance that was different than the one that Adam and his mom had entered through. The employee asked all the children if their parents were in the store. All the older boys said no, but Adam, who was very shy and very quiet and probably scared and confused, you know, he thinks he's getting in trouble, didn't say anything. I can only hope that the employee thought that Adam was like the younger sibling of one of the older boys and didn't just leave a 6-year-old outside the mall alone, but now he was. All the older boys, they left, took off on foot or their bikes, and now 6-year-old Adam was left alone outside of the mall. Multiple witnesses claimed to have all seen the same man creepily hanging around the toy section, including the area where the boys were playing video games, shortly before Adam disappeared. And an entire different set of witnesses described the same man dangerously speeding out of the mall parking lot in a blue van shortly after Adam would have vanished. So now I'm going to tell you a little bit about our first suspect of the day, and that would be very close family friend Jimmy Campbell. Adam's parents and Jimmy were like family for years. They were close family friends years before Adam was ever even born. He even lived with the family for a while and even slept in Adam's bedroom for a little bit. But Jimmy and Adam's dad had had a recent falling out, and Jimmy had moved out of the home recently before Adam disappeared. Jimmy was also the only person that knew that Adam and his mom were going to be at that Sears at that time on that day. Jimmy was questioned many times, and it was during one of those times that he admitted that him and Adam's mother were having a years-long affair, that they were in love, and Jimmy wanted her to leave her husband for him, but that she said that she couldn't leave her husband because a custody battle will be too messy and too hard on her son Adam, and maybe that they could be together when Adam's older and out of the house. Seems like a motive to me. And while being questioned, even though Adam had only been missing for a few days, Jimmy kept referring to Adam in the past tense, which is never a good sign. Also, Adam has always been described as being this incredibly shy child who was kind of afraid of strangers and would not easily go off with someone he did not know. Jimmy was someone he knew and knew well. Someone he wouldn't be afraid of. And to cast even more suspicion on Jimmy, he was actually the coach of Adam's t-ball team. So they questioned all of the teammates, and one boy named Tony actually accused his coach Jimmy of SAing him. So they questioned Jimmy about this, but they don't say like the name of the boy that accused him. They just say something like, one of the kids you coach say that you did something to them. And Jimmy just immediately goes, Tony's lying. Is he? Jimmy was ruled out as a possible person of interest after passing a polygraph test. And then 2 weeks after Adam disappeared, a grisly discovery was made by two fishermen at a canal. What the men first believed was possibly the head of like a baby doll turned out to be the head of 6-year-old Adam Walsh. Since this is a child, I don't want to get too graphic, but I will say that during the autopsy, it was clear that this was not done by like an alligator. And to this day, the rest of Adam's remains have never been uncovered. After the tragic discovery, two men came out and said that before they found Adam's head, they had seen a man with a blue van, if you remember, throwing something into that canal. At this point, Adam's story was very well known across the entire nation and everyone was heartbroken. 2 years later, a made-for-TV movie about Adam's story debuted on TV, and the very next day, convicted serial killer Otis Toole made a jailhouse confession that he was the one responsible. Which brings us to our second suspect of the day. So Otis claimed that him and his partner in crime plus lover, Henry Lucas, had been the ones to kidnap and kill Adam. Otis and Henry had been on a crime spree across the entire nation before both being incarcerated. They are both known as the confession killers because between the two of them, they have both confessed or falsely confessed to a total of 1,000 murders. So when Otis confessed the day after a movie about Adam debuted on TV, they were very skeptical. And then they were even more skeptical when they found out that the man that Otis said that he kidnapped and killed Adam with was actually behind bars the day that Adam disappeared. So Otis changed his story for the first time, said that he alone lured Adam away into his car with the promise of candy. And as a shy child who was terrified of strangers, like Adam has always been described, I do not buy that because I was an outgoing child and I would have been very scared of that man and I would not have gone with him for any reason. He's scary looking. I mean, look at him. Otis then recanted his confessions that he just did it just because he wanted attention. He then confessed again, he changed his story, he recanted that confession, changed his story, confessed again, and he did this dozens of times. It was like a game to him. One day, Otis confessed to being the one that did this to Adam. He then recanted that confession, only to confess again, all within 12 minutes. There has been circumstantial evidence that maybe Otis is telling the truth, but never anything concrete, never DNA evidence or anything like that. They did find a pair of little shorts, like little boys' shorts at Otis's mother's house that were like the ones that Adam was wearing that day, but that was like the only thing like semi-concrete. Otis did know some details about the case that were not released to the public, only for it to later come out that he heard those details from another investigator. There was never enough evidence to arrest and convict Otis, and in 1995, he passed away in prison from liver disease, leaving behind one more deathbed confession that he was the one responsible for killing Adam Walsh. And then in 2008, Adam's case was officially closed, listing Otis as being the one responsible, which has been very controversial because if you have no evidence to arrest him and convict him of the crime, how do you have enough evidence to close the case? Now let's discuss our final suspect of the day, and that would be notorious serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer. When Jeffrey Dahmer was arrested in 1991, he confessed to killing 17 boys and men between the years of 1978 and 1991. And remember, Adam disappeared in 1981, so like right there in the middle. At the time that Adam was kidnapped, Jeffrey Dahmer was living in the same area. He actually only worked about a 15 to 20 minute drive away from the mall that Adam disappeared from. Jeffrey Dahmer also had access to a work van from his job that was, you guessed it, blue. It was a blue van. And when he was arrested in 1991 and then his face was plastered on every TV across the country, seven separate people called and said that he was the man that they saw at the mall hanging around the toy section where the kids were playing video games, and he was the one driving the blue van that was speeding away after Adam disappeared. But Jeffrey Dahmer always adamantly denied being the one responsible. He even said, like, I've confessed to every crime I've ever committed, crimes that you guys didn't even know about, I told you about, so why would I not confess to this? But in a later interview, Jeffrey Dahmer said if I admitted to it, I would be killed in prison for being a PDF file. And the person interviewing him said that he felt like that was his way of saying that he did it. But it is important to note that Adam Walsh's parents do accept what the Hollywood Police Department say, and that Otis was the one that did that to their son. Adam Walsh's parents have also done a lot of good after experiencing the most tragic thing that anyone could ever experience ever, losing a child in that brutal way. They have set up so many things that have changed the way that missing children's cases are handled. They have changed laws. They even co-founded the National Center of Missing and Exploited Children, which is really, really cool. Adam's father, John Walsh, also went on to famously host the TV show America's Most Wanted, which I know every single one of you guys have heard about. And that show also did a lot of good, putting away hundreds of bad people. I am so interested to get your guys' takes on this case today. I swear we could dive so deep into this case for hours and hours and hours. I was actually considering maybe doing Adam Walsh's story, diving even deeper into all the theories when my podcast comes out, which is coming out so soon. I swear, guys, you guys keep asking me about it. It's coming out. Turns out a lot of stuff has to, happen for you to put together a podcast, and I don't want to half-ass it for you. That's why I haven't been posting as much, because I'm trying to work like half on that, half on TikTok, so I swear it's coming. If you want me to do my first episode or one of my first episodes on Adam Walsh and dive even deeper, please let me know in the comments. And while you're there, please let me know who you think is responsible for what happened to Adam. Personally, I don't know, but I don't think it was Otis. I do not think this case is solved. I really think that maybe it was Jimmy, the family friend. Jeffrey Dahmer is also a really interesting theory as well. Please let me know what you think in the comments. And while you're there, let me know what case you want to see me cover next. I love you guys so much. And I will see you tomorrow. I'll see you tomorrow. This might be the most evil serial killer couple in all of history, Ian Brady and Myra Hindley. Ian Brady was a textbook sociopath who many say was born evil. Unlike most serial killers, Ian Brady never experienced any childhood abuse or any extreme traumatic incidents. As a child, he had a bizarre fascination with World War II for all the wrong reasons, if you know what I mean. He would play war with other neighborhood kids and insist on being the Germans. Very different stuff than when I used to play mermaids. He was always incredibly smart, but he was also very manipulative. He was very distant and very violent. He had a lot of dark interests and he had trouble holding down a job, and it was at one of his many jobs that he met the shy 18-year-old Myra Hindley. Myra was like the exact opposite of Ian. She was very shy, she was very religious, she was a devout Catholic, and people liked Myra. People did not like Ian, except for Myra, because when she met Ian, she became infatuated with him. All of their other coworkers thought that Ian was a weirdo, but Myra thought that his attitude was like mysterious and sexy. Myra would write in her diary like every single day about Ian for like nearly a year, but he never gave her the time of day. He did not care about this like 18-year-old girl who was like clearly obsessed with him. It actually wasn't until they knew each other for over a year that Ian finally asked Myra out, and from there she was hooked. Myra changed everything about herself to be with Ian. She changed her beliefs, the way that she dressed. She stopped going to church. She became mean. She would do anything that he told her to do, and she would believe anything he told her to believe. Like if Ian told Myra that the sky wasn't blue and the sky was actually purple, she would like go to her grave saying that the sky was purple. Myra was obsessed with Ian, but Ian was obsessed with the idea of taking a human life. How they would do it is they would find a child walking alone and have the sweet-seeming young girl Myra lure them into the vehicle with a promise of just giving them a ride. Once they were in the vehicle, Myra would convince the child to help her find an expensive glove that she thought she lost at an area called the moor. But once they got to the moor, Ian would violently essay the child, unalive them before burying them at the site. 16-year-old Pauline Reed was walking to a school dance when she was picked up by Myra. She actually knew Myra because she went to the same school as her younger sister. 12-year-old John Kilbride was walking home from the movies. 12-year-old Keith Bennett was walking to his grandmother's house. And 10-year-old Leslie Ann Downey disappeared the day after Christmas from a local fair. All of them were essayed and then unalived by Ian. With their youngest victim, 10-year-old Leslie Ann, Ian actually took photos of her, like CP photos of her first, and then actually made an audio recording of her screaming and begging for her life and begging for her mom while he played Christmas music in the background because it was the day after Christmas. Children from the area were disappearing left and right, and nobody was suspecting Ian and or Myra. They probably could have gotten away with this forever if it hadn't been for Ian when he tried to introduce another partner in crime. Ian and Myra's first victim, 16-year-old Pauline, actually had a boyfriend named David Smith. And because Ian is like such a twisted, messed up individual, after killing David's girlfriend, he tried to befriend David and like manipulate him the same way he had done Myra. He was telling his new buddy David that they were gonna commit crimes together, be partners in crime, like they were gonna rob banks and stuff. David was only 17 years old, and after his girlfriend Pauline went missing, he was actually a suspect for a while, and then coincidentally married Myra's younger sister. So now he's Myra's brother-in-law. On October 6, 1965, Ian picked up a 17-year-old boy named Edward Evans and then brought him back to him and Myra's house. He introduced his girlfriend Myra as his sister and then instructed Myra to go pick up her brother-in-law and his new best friend David. When David walked into the home, he literally walked in to Ian unaliving Edward. David promised that he would be back in the morning so he could help him bury Edward's body, but the second he got home, he actually threw up and then confessed to his wife about what he had just seen at her sister's house, and then he alerted the police. When they went to the home of Ian and Myra, they of course found Edward's body, but they also found the photos and the recording of the missing 10-year-old girl, Leslie Ann, and then they also found the missing 12-year-old boy John's name scribbled in one of their notebooks. After doing a search of the moor area, they found the remains of Leslie Ann and John, and then they just stopped searching even though they have 2 other missing children that they know of that disappeared from the same time, same area. I digress. So they charged Ian and Myra with the 3 deaths that they knew of, which they were found guilty on all charges for. It would actually be years until either of them confessed to unaliving Pauline and Keith. But sadly, to this day, the remains of 12-year-old Keith Bennett have never been found, and his own mother would continue to search the moor area for any sign of her missing child until she passed away in 2012. Myra Hindley's involvement in these crimes are still highly debated to this day. She claims that she was only involved in the actual kidnapping of the children, but Ian Brady claims that she was involved in at least 2 of the essays and unalivings. Ian and Myra have both since passed away in prison. It's speculated to this day whether or not there's more victims out there. Ian himself even claimed to have 5 more victims that we just don't know of. A really eerie part of this case is that Ian and Myra would actually go to the moor area all the time, and they would actually pose where they had buried their victims. There's some like really eerie photos just knowing that they're standing on like the burial sites of children. This case fascinates a lot of people, how Myra, who was just a sweet, religious 18-year-old girl, met a boy and then was able to go on to do the most heinous crimes that anyone could ever do. Definitely let me know all your thoughts and theories on this case. Do you think there's more victims out there? What role do you think Myra Hindley really played in these heinous crimes? And while you're in the comment section, let me know what case you want to see me cover next. I love you guys so much. I will see you tomorrow. This is Dennis Rader, also known as the BTK killer. short for bind, torture, kill. This evil creature was on a killing spree from 1974 to 1991 and almost got away with it. He wasn't caught until 30 years after his killing spree started in one of the most low IQ ways I've ever heard of a serial killer getting caught. Unlike most serial killers, Dennis Rader came from a normal childhood, no abuse or traumatic events that we're aware of. Actually, the only thing abnormal about Dennis's childhood was himself. From an incredibly young age, he had dark interests and dark fantasies. He was a peeping Tom and also would hurt neighborhood animals and pets. Dennis got married in 1971, 3 years before he would start killing. Him and his wife had 2 children, and they were the all-American family, living the American dream, and Dennis was definitely seen as your typical family man. Dennis worked multiple jobs. He was the president of the council of his church. He was also the Cub Scout leader of his son's Boy Scout troop. He was also living a double life. Dennis would later explain to investigators when he got caught that he killed because there was a force within him that he called Factor X, and it would turn him into the Minotaur when he was going dark. If you've ever watched Dexter, the TV show, think of Dexter and his dark passenger. Dennis's first victims were a family, Julie and Joseph Otero, and their 2 younger children, 11-year-old Josie and 9-year-old Joey. And it was actually their 3 older children that found their bodies when they returned home from school. His typical MO was that he would stalk a woman for a few weeks to learn their schedule, and then he would either break into their homes while they were away and wait for them to get home, or he would force himself into their homes while they were there. And then he had like this fake story that he was like a man on the run from a different state, and he only needed to come into their home so he could rob them for like money, food, and their car. There are some pretty terrifying details about Dennis's killing spree that he would tell investigators when he would get caught. One of them being is after stalking one of his potential victims for a few weeks to learn her schedule, he waited in her home after breaking in and waited for her to get home, but she was like late coming home. I don't know if she got stuck in traffic or if she made plans for after work, but he got so bored of waiting for her that he just left, sparing her life, and then he randomly broke into the home of another woman who was a single mom and took her life in front of her children. Also, during his years of being active as a serial killer, Dennis Rader worked for a home security system company, installing security systems for homes. And when news broke that there was a serial killer in his hometown of Wichita, Kansas, a lot of people started getting home security. Like, the amount of people getting home security systems skyrocketed. And Dennis Rader himself was one of the people installing many of the home security systems. So a lot of people allowed Dennis Rader to enter their home to install home security systems because they were afraid of the serial killer, and he was the one that they were afraid of. In 2004, it had been 13 years since BTK had had a victim. He would later say that he just got busy being a father. Well, the media started saying that people weren't afraid of BTK anymore, and he was either, passed away or in prison for an unrelated crime, or was just too old to be a serial killer anymore. And Dennis Rader did not like this, not one bit. You see, at the end of the day, Dennis Rader is a narcissist who desperately needs attention and to feel special. Some people also refer to him as a criminal mastermind, but that is not true. It's a fluke that he did not get caught for 30 years. This man is incredibly stupid, and it would actually be his own stupidity and his need for attention that would lead to him getting caught. He wanted people to know that he was still out there, so he began leaving things for the local newspaper, the local news outlet, and also the investigators on his case. Things like letters, poems, word puzzles. He thinks that he's like Zodiac or something. He would also leave details about his crimes that were not released to the public, as well as trophies he had taken from his victims. And on 2 different times, he left dolls that were tied up to look like his victims, like binded up. So not only were they able to find out what car he drove because they looked at the surveillance footage of one of the places he dropped off one of these packages, but he ended up doing, I swear, the dumbest thing I've ever heard of a serial killer doing that led to them getting caught. In one of his communications with investigators, he asked them that if he were to give them a document on a floppy disk, if they were able to track what computer it came from. So the investigators took out an ad in the newspaper and told him, like, nah, man, you can send us a disc. We won't be able to trace you at all. You're good. And he believed it. And within minutes of receiving the disc, investigators were able to track that it came from the computer of the church that he was council president of. But it literally said on the document that it was last modified by Dennis. Dennis ended up making a full confession and was sentenced to 10 consecutive life sentences, where he is still alive today, rotting away in prison. He actually has to spend most of his sentence in solitary confinement to keep him safe from other prisoners. I say let him out with the other inmates, but that is just me maybe. If you watched it in this video, thank you so much. Let me know what notorious serial killer you want to see us cover next and bully and roast a little bit. I love you guys so much. Thank you for watching, and I will see you tomorrow. The most notorious serial killer family, the Bloody Benders. This case is going to take us back all the way to the 1870s in Kansas. This is a case of the old Wild West. At this time in American history, colonizers were pushing out the indigenous people off their lands and then selling their land to white settlers for very cheap. Because of this, many people were leaving their old lives, some of which were actually escaping their old lives, to move to the Midwest, the old Wild West, including that of the Bender family. At the time, many people believed that our two older Benders, named John and Kate, that we're going to refer to as Ma and Pa, were the parents of the two younger Benders, also named John and Kate. But the two younger John and Kate were oddly close, leading to many rumors about their relation at the time. Many people believe actually that they were a couple posing as brother and sister. The Bender family bought multiple acres, they had a large property, and then they built a very small cabin on the property that they lived at. They also used this cabin to double as a small business, so they opened a bit of like a grocery store and also an inn. Bender Cabin was the only grocery store or inn for miles in any direction, so many of those people that were traveling to the Midwest to start new lives had to ultimately stop at the Bender Cabin for a nice meal and a place to sleep. All was fine until those travelers began to disappear. Now let's talk about the Benders a little bit again. So Ma and Pa were extremely intimidating. Pa was this big burly man, and then Ma was a bit of an a-hole. She was seen as extremely rude to her customers, and people in the area referred to her as the she-devil. The younger John was nice, but he kind of gave people the creeps. The only Bender that people actually liked was the daughter Kate. She was said to be incredibly beautiful, overly friendly, a tad flirty, and she would use her charm to convince the travelers to stay at her family's inn. Kate was also said to be a psychic medium and would sell her abilities out of her family's inn. So many of these travelers that were stopping by the Bender family inn were traveling to start new lives across the country, so they were traveling with all of their life savings and then any of their belongings that had any worth. After being charmed by Kate Bender to stay the night at her family's inn, share a meal with her, or witness her psychic abilities, they would be, sitting with their back turned to a canvas board that would separate the inn part to the actual family's living quarters. And then while they're sitting there, chatting up this beautiful young girl, John and Pa would sneak up behind them and bash them over the head with hammers. They would be robbed of everything that they owned before being buried on the property or dumped somewhere else, including that of a father named George and his very young daughter, Marianne. The daughter, Marianne's age has been debated because honestly, this story has become a bit of American folklore, but it is believed that she was about 7 years old. The father and daughter had plans of traveling through the Midwest and buying land in Iowa before they were never heard of again. They had a very close family friend named Dr. William York, who was expecting a letter from his friend when him and his daughter got to Iowa, but that letter never came. So Dr. York went looking for his missing friend and then was also never seen again. But Dr. York had two brothers who were pretty well off in their neighborhood. They were wealthy men, and they put together a search party of over 50 men to go looking for their missing brother. They questioned every single person and every single house across the trail through the Midwest, and it seemed that the last house that they were ever seen at was that of the Bender family. The Bender family were friendly and cooperative with the search party. They even told them that yes, Dr. York had stayed here overnight, but he had left in the morning, and they even blamed what happened to Dr. York as possibly being committed by the Native American people in the area. Kate Bender even offered to help the search party by using her psychic abilities to find out what happened to their brother for a fee, of course. The search party declined Kate Bender using her psychic abilities, and then they continued on in their search. Some time passed, and then the neighbors of the Bender family realized that they hadn't seen any members of the family in a long time. They checked their property, and the farm animals that they had on their land all looked extremely neglected, and they even found a baby cow passed away from dehydration. Inside of the Bender's cabin, all of their belongings were gone, and there was an overwhelming, terrible smell of death coming from a trap door that was hidden in the floor. When they went through the trap door, it took them to the cellar, and it was just absolutely covered in blood. They began digging on the property, and that's when they found nearly 20 bodies of the missing travelers, nearly half of which were never identified. And the Bender family was gone, never to be seen again. A large dead or alive bounty was put on the Bender family's heads, which led many vigilante groups to go hunting for the Benders, some of which said that they actually found the Benders and killed them, but they were never able to show their bodies, so this is probably a lie. And to this day, whatever happened to the Bender family when they escaped Kansas is one of the greatest mysteries of the Wild West. We know very little about who the Bender family really was, if their names were even John and Kate Bender, but I definitely am second guessing the people in my life with the last name Bender about their possible family lineage. We have covered quite a few older cases, but I do believe that this is the oldest case we've ever covered. If you like this, like diving a bit more into like the true crime history of decades and decades and hundreds of years in the past, let me know. We can definitely keep doing it. Let me know all your thoughts on this case in the comments, any of your theories, and while you're there, let me know what case you want to see me cover next. I love you guys so much. Be safe this weekend, and I will see you tomorrow. The FBI says that this man is the most prolific serial killer in all of American history, and no one really ever talks about him. He went nearly undetected for over 40 years and took the lives of 93 women. He's also very well known for having drawn all 93 of his victims, which is creepy and haunting, but it ended up being very helpful. Samuel Little was born to a teenage S-worker. He claims to have been born in prison, but also that his biological mother abandoned him on the side of the road while he was a newborn. He was raised by his grandmother, and from an incredibly young age, like 5 years old, Samuel Little was showing concerning behavior. Between the ages of 5 and 8 years old, he developed an obsession with women's necks that would then intertwine with all of his fantasies, including choking and strangulation. As a young child, he began committing petty crimes, which landed him in a reform school for troubled boys, but this school did not help Samuel Little in any way. He says it was the kind of place where the older, stronger boys would assault and essay the younger, weaker ones, and it was at this place that Samuel Little became the victim and the abuser. After leaving the home for boys, he went on to commit more crimes, landing himself in juvie and then adult prison multiple times. Then as a young adult into his adulthood, Samuel Little became a drifter, nomad type, traveling across all of the United States, committing many different crimes, including murder. The first that we know of is in Miami, Florida, 1970. He says he went to Miami to develop a relationship with his biological mom, but this relationship soon became intimate. It was in Miami that one night out in a bar, Samuel Little met a woman, a 33-year-old woman named Mary. He was able to convince her to leave with him. He drove them to a secluded area where he put his hands around her neck and strangled her. Sadly, her body would not be found and then identified for nearly half a century. Samuel Little's victims were the most vulnerable of women. Typically, they were S-workers, single moms trying to make ends meet. They were addicts, homeless women, or mentally disabled women. His victims would all be strangled because of his obsession with women's necks. Sometimes he would also essay his victims, but most of the time, just the act itself was enough to get him off. Samuel Little was also arrested like 30 times during his killing spree for various different crimes, mostly shoplifting and other theft. He would spend 1 year in prison here, 2 years in prison here. He was never locked up for long because all of his arrests were in different states. In 1982, Samuel Little was seen leaving a bar with a mentally disabled woman named Patricia Ann Mount. This will be the last time she was ever seen alive. When her body was later found, Samuel Little was the prime suspect and he was arrested. Sadly, a jury acquitted Samuel Little for this murder, and now he's more confident than ever. He's just gotten away with murder. Samuel Little was killing dozens of women across all of the United States for nearly half a century and was getting away with it. Samuel Little also had a handful of girlfriends throughout his killing spree. What these women really knew about his crimes is unknown, but one of his girlfriends was actually admitted into a psychiatric hospital after her relationship with Little, after she kept rambling on and on about dead girls. In 2013, investigators from LA were doing DNA testing on 3 cold cases on 3 murders that they had unsolved from the 1980s when they finally got a DNA match on Samuel Little. He had to be wheeled into his trial. He was 74 years old at this time. He was very nasty, very cocky, but he was maintaining his innocence. But he was found guilty of all 3 murder charges that he was being charged for this time and was sentenced to 3 life sentences. 5 years later, in 2018, Samuel Little was being investigated, questioned multiple times by an investigator who thought that Samuel Little was responsible for a cold case that he had. One cold case. Imagine his shock when Samuel Little confesses to have killed 93 women. Allegedly, Samuel Little had a photographic memory and was able to draw all 93 of his victims with insane accuracy. With the drawings that he created behind prison and also his confession, they were able to line up his victims, his confessions, his drawings with a huge list that they had of cold cases, Jane Does, and missing persons across the entire country. More than 60 of his victims' drawings have been definitively matched as of today, leaving another 30 or so sadly left unclaimed and unknown. But the FBI does believe that he has all 93 victims that he confesses, which makes him the largest number of confirmed victims of any serial killer in United States history. Samuel Little said a lot of really gross things about his victims, like he loved them and that they loved him and that they're actually friends and that they will be together forever in the afterlife. Samuel Little passed away of natural causes in December of 2020 at the age of 80 years old. As far as I know, the FBI is still trying to identify the rest of Samuel Little's victims from his drawings, so I do urge, if you or anyone you know has a missing loved one that is female, from the years of 1970 to 2012, to look at Samuel Little's drawings. And if you watched to the end of this video, thank you so much. Let me know what case you want to see me cover next. If there's another notorious serial killer you want to see me dive deeper into, let me know in the comments. I love you guys so much, and I will see you guys all tomorrow.